So we now entering the third section of this chapter, and it's a very important one. So we will look at the main foreign market entry strategy. And so we look at three elements in sequence: where to enter, so how do we select the market, how do we enter, and when do we enter. So very important to keep that in mind. So if we start with the market selection, actually, if I do it very theoretically, and if you do a nice consulting assignment, you will consider several countries to enter. So imagine you're a Belgian company, you have started doing business first in Wallonia, then to Brussels and Flanders, and you want now to go abroad. So you will probably ask yourself, well, should I start with France, with Netherlands, with Germany, with Luxembourg, with the US, with Japan, with China, all of them together, and so on. So that's really what I mean with market selection. Where do I go? And a very nice exercise at the end is to plot all the countries that you have considered in that sort of 2x2 matrix with two axes. The first one is the market attractiveness, so how attractive is the market, and then the feasibility to enter, how easy is it to enter. So high means it's easy to enter the market, high here means it's very attractive to enter the market. And obviously you want to start with the countries that are in the top right corner, and you will obviously avoid the countries that are in the bottom left corner. So that's very simple, but sometimes complex questions, it's nice to simplify them and to look at them with a simple framework. Then obviously to plot the countries along those two axes can be quite complex, and that's the beauty of strategy. I think you need to be very analytical, you need to put facts, figures, but there is also a part of judgment, and you never know in advance if your decision will be the good one. So you can do a lot of analysis, a lot of research to come up with the decision to go first to France and then to Germany, and actually it was a mistake and you should have gone to the Netherlands. So you never know in advance, but it's good to do your homework, it's good to do your study. So what we're going to do is now in depth, relatively in depth. So I invite you to read carefully the slides, and I will give some voiceover now. But I will try to explain you how you plot the countries along the market attractiveness axis, and how you do it along the feasibility to entry axis. And then for the market attractiveness, actually you will combine a selection of hard and soft factors. And the goal at the end is to give them a global score. So it's quite easy. If I'll come back to that on the second one. And the feasibility enter, you will see it's much more judgmental, but it makes it even more interesting. So I zoom first in the market attractiveness. So usually you will select a few hard and soft criteria. Usually you will take the GDP, you will take the unemployment rate, the labor cost, the corporate tax, for example, but you have many other. And then you will also look at some factors, soft factors, the education of the workforce, the IP rights, the burden of regulation, the freedom of the press, the language skills of the people, and so on and so forth. So imagine I do it very simple. You take 5 criteria. You take GDP growth, unemployment rate, and so on. And you have several countries to consider for an entry. Well, it's very simple. So for the 5 criteria, you will rank each country in sequence. So for the GDP per capita, if you have and let's take 2 extreme example, but if you have Germany and you have Venezuela, well, GDP per capita, Germany will be before Venezuela, and so on. So you rank every time the countries on your factors. You give a weight to the factors. So here, let's say that every country has every factor has the same weight. Then at the end you will have a score per country. And if I go back to my matrix along this axis, well, if this is Germany, well, you will see that they've received the one of the highest score on the attractiveness axis. So quite simple. Then, if you look at the feasibility axis, how easy is it to enter a market? And for this one, we will use the CAGE framework. The CAGE stands for cultural distance, administrative and political distance, geographic distance, and economic distance. And usually we say that the distance, and the distance means it's difficult, how more distance you have, how further away it is, how more difficult it is to enter a country. And so if I take the cultural distance, the distance between two countries increase, for example, with different languages. It's probably, if you're based in Wallonia, it's probably easier to enter into France than into Germany. Different ethnicity, different religion, different social norms, lack of social network, and lack of trust. So this dimension will mostly affect some industry. So if you think about TV content, well, it's probably easier to target the markets where speaking the same language as you. For food, the religious aspect can be important, and so on and so forth. Then you have the administrative and political distance, and the distance between two countries will increase. Well, if you have no trade agreement, if you have no common legislation, if you have very different political institutions, well, the distance increase. That's it. And this will have an impact very specifically for some industry. So in aerospace, for example, if you have some block into the legislation in terms of telecommunication, in terms of oil and mining, there it will be difficult to exploit the natural resources of another country. Third one, we have the geographical distance, and it's really the number of kilometers. That's the physical remoteness. If you don't have a common border, if you don't have easy transportation links, if you have big difference in time zones. So that's very pragmatic, but indeed, it plays a role. And there it will affect some industry a lot. So for the cement, the cement, that's something very heavy, but with a very low value to weight ratio. So that's probably not somewhere you want to produce at the end of the world and then bring back into your country. It's true as well for very fragile or perishable goods. Things about meat, well, you cannot produce meat at the other end of the world. And then when communication is vital, for some financial services, you maybe want to be closer, really, in terms of distance. And then finally, you have the economic distance. Think about the different consumer incomes, the different cost of and quality of human resources, the different information of knowledge. And this impact, for cars, you cannot easily sell a Mercedes in a very poor country. It's true as well for insurance, because you have very different needs there, and so on and so forth. So you see, you can look. So again, if you're a Belgian company and you hesitate between launching your product or developing yourself in France, in Germany, in USA, in Japan, you take all the countries and you ask yourself, okay, in terms of cultural distance, languages. I have the same language in France, but it's different in other countries, but I speak English, but I don't speak Japanese at all. So it's probably more difficult to enter Japan, and so on and so forth. So you do that. I agree, it's much more judgmental, but I think it's also the beauty of the exercise. You need to assess also based on your own strengths and understanding. And when you've done that for all the countries, you're able to plot them into this axis. And at the end, now you have done both axes, and you will have all your country, all your option in this nice graph, and this narrow down your options. So that's as easy as that, but it's to tell you that where to enter. It's not a random exercise. You need to invest significant time and resource into it, and then you better positioned to make a well-informed choice. So read carefully this. If you have any question on that, you can come back to me. But as well, I will add some literature. I will not go in depth into the Hofstede cultural framework. I'm pretty sure you've seen that in other classes. This actually is to go further on the cultural distance. I've been very basic in my examples. You can be much more granular on this dimension by using the Hofstede framework. It's actually quite interesting. It's quite old, but it's still very true. And it enables you to compare two countries. And sometimes, two very close countries like Germany and France can be quite different when you use the framework of Hofstede. And you see here the results for those two countries. So I don't go in depth into it. You probably know it and you can read it, but it's important when you consider the cultural dimension there. Okay, I will stop the recording here. So it's a nice block on where to enter, and then we have the part for the where and for the how and the when. Sorry.